Okay, another great episode of the Ortho Show. We're going West Coast with Hafiz Kassam, who's one of the up-and-coming shoulder and elbow specialists out on the West Coast. He's in private practice out at Newport Orthopedic Institute. He has one of the coolest educational pedigrees I've ever seen. Literally went to St. Andrews in Scotland, where he literally just missed Prince William and Princess Kate, and then goes to England for medical school, and then Toronto for residency, and then the Yale Fellowship with Ted Blaine, and now is in private practice, just doing a fantastic job. He's a member of societies, really making a name for himself, even though in private practice, about being part of a larger community in orthopedics. It's a really fascinating story for all of our international listeners that are thinking about a pathway coming to the United States. I think you'll enjoy this episode very much. Dr. Scott Sigman, hashtag follow the fro, host of the Ortho Show. We'll see you soon.
From Medical Media, this is The Ortho Show.
Hello, world. Dr. Scott Sigman, yes, your favorite opioid-sparing orthopedic surgeon, here for another awesome episode of the Ortho Show podcast, where everyone knows we bring the best of the best. We are going West Coast today. We're bringing on a dear friend of mine, one of the up-and-coming outstanding orthopedic surgeons, Dr. Hafiz Kassam, who's an orthopedic surgeon that specializes in shoulder and elbow. He's in private practice in Newport Beach, California. How the hell did you get that job? We're all jealous. He's at the Newport Orthopedic Institute and the Hoag Orthopedic Institute as well. Hafiz, what a pleasure it is to have you on the show, brother.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here.
All right, man. I've been doing some deep dive on you here. You got some really juicy stuff, man. You may have the coolest educational pedigree of anybody that's been on the show so far. But look, we always start at the beginning. We want to know like where and when. It looks like a little birdie told me, or you may have grown up in Vancouver, Canada, but were your parents doctors? Was the medical school the track for you the whole way? Where did it all start?
Yeah, so people always ask, where am I from? So it's always a hard question. My parents, so I was born in Canada. I was born in Vancouver. Same with my sister. My parents are actually from East Africa. So my parents and grandparents were born in Uganda in East Africa. And then way back when, emigrated from India and northern Iran. And then my parents came as refugees in the 70s when Idi Amin came to power in East Africa. And then so my parents came to the US, or to Canada in the 70s, kind of settled there in their teens, grew up. And then I was born in the late 80s, and then kind of grew up in Vancouver, finished high school, and then moved on from there and hopped around country to country for.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, first of all, Vancouver is such a cool city, right? Yeah. I mean, what a great place. It's absolutely beautiful. For everybody that doesn't know, it's just north of San Francisco. It's in Canada. It's awesome. But all right, so how the hell did you get to St. Andrews in Scotland? I know that, maybe you wanted to date Princess Kate. I don't know, but, Prince William was there just a few years in front of you. But how did St. Andrews in Scotland? That's not the normal path. How did that come about?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, so I went to a very, how do I say this? A very British-leaning school in Canada. So, suit and tie every day. It was extremely set up by people who had immigrated from England, 100 years ago. So it was always kind of British leaning. And then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So in the UK, boxing is kind of like how wrestling is in the US. It's kind of like a Division I or the equivalent, or however I want to talk about it, but it's basically a university-based sport. So that was kind of my jam when I was finishing high school. So I went and I boxed, I guess, to a fairly high level in the UK for several years, or in Scotland for a few years, and then in England for a few years. And that's kind of the impetus for why I went.
All right, so let's back up the bean footage here for a little bit here. It's like, I was a Division I boxer. What's the big deal? But it's like, all right, so you're in high school. Who's telling you to be a boxer? Where did that come from?
Yeah, no one at all. I talking about B film, I literally probably saw some junky B movie when I was 14 and then told my dad I wanted to learn how to box. I mean, it was like I said, the school sports at that time, it was rowing, rugby was a mandatory sport. Like, it was just a very British leaning place. And then I learned to box so I mean, the stories that so in Vancouver, there's a east side of downtown Vancouver. There's a intersection on the corner of East Hastings and Main. Doesn't mean anything to anybody, but it's the worst intersection in the city fighting for the country, right? It's a really terrible area. And then on the corner of it is a hotel or motel, right? Rents by the hour. And then on the bottom floor, there was a bar, and in the basement, there was a gym. And that's where I learned fight when I was about 14. My dad took me there. I said, "You want to learn to box?" Started going there, and then just started going.
Good for your dad. I mean, like,
after school. And then
if you're going to learn how to box, you got to learn how to box where they really know how to box. So I love that. Dad's all into it. I love it. So literally, you get good at this, and I'm assuming that you went to St. Andrews to box. I mean, that was part of your gig.
Well, I mean, it was part of, I went for school, right? I went
Yeah.
in education, and I think the byproduct is there I could do the sport I wanted to do.
That's awesome.
As opposed to staying in North America where it would be something on the side and interfere. So it was a way to kind of make everyone happy, do what I wanted to do, still go to school. That was the idea.
All right. So you missed out on Princess Kate. She wound up with William after all. So, but then from there, you're going to stay, and medical school is part of the path at this point, and you're going to University of Manchester for medical school. And I guess you continue to box there. We'll move out of the boxing thing. I don't want to bog you down too much, but still, medical school in England, that was your next path. Once you were there, it sort of seemed like that's the trajectory that would be the best to sort of get you into medical school.
Yeah, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest with you. And I think when you're young and you think alternative options for career choices are smart, like boxing and sports, reality hits, and then you decide to do something more practical. So that's where that ended. And because of how the University of Manchester functions, I got put on an orthopedic track actually in Wrightington. So it was actually the Charnley Hip Center. So that's where I had my first clinical rotations in orthopedics. And I think that's probably where it all started, to be honest with you. Being able to just learn at the Wrightington Hip Center was a pretty big deal at that time. I didn't know the implications of that, obviously, at the beginning, in retrospect. I think that's where it all started.
So they helped you select orthopedics. It sounds to me
pretty much, yeah, I think
pretty much like all right, you're not doing well enough in school. We're going to put you with the orthopedic guys so you can like bag in hips, right? No, I'm just kidding, of course. But that's very different than here in the States, right? Where you go through everything and then you decide what track and things you're going to be on. So I think that's really cool. But then, all right, so now so you get into orthopedics early on, the medical training. That's part of the track, and then so you're going to do orthopedics for residency. And how hard is it to get back into Canada where you get to, University of Toronto for your orthopedic residency? So, I mean, we have listeners from all over the world who are always interested in wanting to know what's the path, how do you get to the States if that's something you want to do in practice? So how about getting into a Canadian residency?
Yeah, so it's harder than you think. So even though I was Canadian, because I did med school abroad, I was still classified as an IMG, right? So it was international medical graduate. So I had to, it was not easy. And the way the Canadian system works is that it's not like in the US where residency programs, there's community programs, academic programs. There's only academic programs. And I think there's 12 or 14 in the country, and that's it, right? And there's a set number of spots, and there's a set number of IMG spots. So I think my year there was 5 IMG spots in the country, and I think there was like 400 applicants. And somehow I was lucky to get the top spot in Toronto, which was I'm just so thankful that happened. It was interesting because I had to write I've written the GMC exams, I've written the Canadian exams, I've written the USMLEs, I've board certified in Canada and the US.
That's a lot. That's a lot of work, brother. That is a lot, but no gap years. You were able to just rock and roll, just kept on going. All right, but then you're not satisfied enough that you haven't learned in enough different countries. You're like the 007 of orthopedics. You're probably a member of the British Secret Service, and we don't even know about it. But from there, from Canada, you're making it, and you get into the Yale Shoulder and Elbow Fellowship. And again, tell us about the difficulties of being a foreign medical grad from England, residency trained in Canada, and now coming to do a fellowship in the United States. How was that all about?
So, I mean, it was. I think it had helped that I'd done residency back in Canada because it helped me reset a lot of my immigration status, for lack of a better term, right? Because I was Canadian and now I'd done a Canadian residency. So then I was, applying for fellowships around, thinking about where to go, and then I interviewed in the U.S., went on the tour, interviewed in Canada as well, and it was actually my first choice, and I was very lucky to match at Yale with Ted Blaine. And I guess we just got along at the interview, and it just kind of worked. But I mean, it was just an incredible experience. So, I went and planned on doing it as a 1 year thing, as most people do. Most Canadians end up doing multiple fellowships. I was pretty convinced at the end of residency, all I really wanted to do was shoulder and elbow. And then I matched and kind of had a very informative experience and decided I think I wanted to stay in the US, depending on market forces and what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and Ted Blaine's been a terrific mentor for you and still is a very dear friend of yours. We'll talk about OC Shoulder in a little bit, which is your course that you guys have created. All right, but it's not a guarantee when you're done your fellowship at Yale. I mean, what's the path of getting a job in the US in private practice? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I came on I come on an H-1 visa. So I just basically come on an educational visa. And then I was thinking about staying. And then my sister had trained in the US. So she's a doctor as well. And she was working in Southern California at the time. So I was looking for jobs in California. I had a few offers, and I found one in Sacramento. And they were essentially willing to sponsor me going on an H-1B. So I was there for a few years and then got the job. And then I eventually got my green card and basically come here now. And then once I finished my job in Sacramento, then I moved to where I am now.
All right, so you were able to go through the additional process of getting, all of the necessary paperwork done, and then here you are. You're good to go, and no big deal. I'm just gonna grab a job in Newport Beach, California. No big deal. Nobody wants a job there. The weather's not very good, and right, it's not like it's sought after or whatever. And then, bam, you land this awesome job at the Newport Orthopedic Institute. That must have been just fantastic. Where the timing must have been just perfect.
Yeah, I think my first job was great. I mean, it was very good people. It was busy. I was doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't from there. I'm not really used to the more rural side of the country. And I think this was, when I'm saying Sacramento, I'm being generous. It was actually about an hour and a half north, right? So it was more rural than I'd ever expected to be. And I really enjoyed it. But I think when they called from here to see if I was interested in the position, and my sister works in Palm Springs, for example, it just made sense for me to go to Southern California. And once I came for the interview and I was on the beach and sort of the job.
Yeah, we really feel terrible for you, Hafiz, that you've had to struggle in your new environment with your new private practice. Yeah. No, it's all good. No, listen, I don't know what it is about you Canadian guys. You're like the newest member of the Canadian Orthopedic Avengers. George Athwal, Danny Goyle, Ivan Wong. You guys are like all supercharged, and you're really doing the most with what you're doing. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you're doing now. You're mainly private practice, but you really have taken a passion about editorial peer review. You're at the ASCS, you're part of AAOS, ANA, Royal College of Surgeons in Canada. You're really society driven. So you're taking a path that's really sort of an academic pathway, but yet still within private practice. You're part of the inner circle now of the cool shoulder club, the kids in the shoulder club that you're a part of. And I love it. Love all of you guys. But where does that passion come from to sort of give you the drive to want to do as much as you're doing outside of just clinical practice?
Yeah, I think, that's a good question. I think it is because I genuinely do like it. Which I think may not be the case for everybody. And I'm not sure if I had gone into another specialty in orthopedics, I would be doing what I'm doing, because I genuinely do enjoy the job, which maybe I didn't expect, or I think I'm just happy that happened that way. So when I'm doing all this stuff outside of it, it's great. And people often ask me, okay, well, you are in this private-demic model, you're in private practice. How come this? How come you're not employed? How come it didn't work out in your first employment? And I often say, well, if my side hustles were not in medicine, I wouldn't be in private practice, right? And I think the reason I am is because all the things I enjoy doing outside of my job are related to my job. And because of that, I think that's why my current model works, because I just enjoy everything else I'm doing on the outside. It just happens to be related to the thing I do for my day job, which is shoulder and elbow surgery. So I think the drive comes from the fact that I actually just like it.
Yeah, no, you and I are very similar in that regard. Orthopedic surgery, they tell me that orthopedic surgery now is my side hustle, but I'm still working hard. I'm seeing plenty of patients and operating, doing all those good things too. But I've always found in private practice, you really have to work harder to be able to be a part of the larger community, right? It would be awfully easy just to sit around and take care of your patients and be on call and just do things. But when you're engaging into societies and committees and peer review and all these things, you always learn more than what you give, right? And it's an impetus to keep you moving and being a part of something larger than just what you're doing. So I'm right there with you, brother, 100%. All right, so look, we don't have enough shoulder courses in the world, and but I really I want the listeners to know that I absolutely love OC Shoulder. I was very pleased to be a part last year, and I'm going to be faculty again this year coming up. And it's such a cool venue. It's literally in Huntington Beach. It's literally right on the ocean. And I want, you and Ted do such a great job bringing industry together in a real intimate way with both faculty as well as the attendees. And it's a real concentrated way to learn some great stuff, and you bring the best people. So where did that come from? Where was the impetus again to start a new course that's just slightly different than the rest it's such a unique place?
Yeah, so it actually started in Sacramento. So when my first year in practice, I was out on an island. I was saying, hey, what should I do to try and make things better for me? So I actually started the Northern California shoulder and elbow meeting. The first year, I had no idea what I was doing. It probably only worked because I didn't understand how much of a pain it was. So I think that it was a blissful ignorance in terms of why that worked. So, I did that. And the impetus for it was I was trying to find a way to be more involved, right? And you just start practice. You don't know anything. You don't know anybody. You go to these meetings. You end up eating dinner alone in your hotel room. No one talks to you. You just don't know anybody, right? It's a little bit hard to get in when you start. And I would come home every weekend and I'd talk to my wife and she would say, well, you come home upset. Why are you going to these things? You're not happy. And I would explain what's going on. And then I would explain how we educate and how we teach and how we run continuing medical education meetings. And for the most part, what was missing was, you can get the education, you can get the networking if you are plugged into the environment. But you'd pay your money, you'd show up, you'd spend the time, you'd take the time off work. But what is something that I was missing that course could give me? And the answer was a network, right? The answer was friends. So what I was trying to do to say, hey, can we change things a little bit where it's not a big meeting, it's a small meeting. I mean, there's only 100 of us go to, at NorCal and OC. But how do you change the paradigm where when people come, they not only leave with good education, good experience, but they leave with friends, right? They leave with a network. And that was really the idea, right? One day meeting on a Saturday. You don't have to, you pay your overhead. You don't have to take time off work, PTO, whatever your model is. You come, it's a reasonable price. You are at round tables all day with the people that you have advertised are the big names. Well, it only matters if you get to talk to them. So now you're sitting at a table with them and you're talking to them, right? You're actually getting that one-to-one interaction. If you're sitting at a table with someone for 8 hours, you're just bound to be friends by the end of it. There's not much choice, right? So I would say one of the biggest compliments I got from that NorCal meeting, which we've tried to transfer now to OC, is one of the faculty members say, hey, I've never given out my cell phone number as many times as I did at that meeting. And I think that was kind of the whole kicker for it. It really clicked. I'm like, okay, that's what we're trying to do here. We are trying to give people something they can't get on their own, which is a network. And I think if you can help facilitate that, you've driven value, right? You've given value to somebody as a differentiator.
And I really like it because you bring in, some interesting faculty too. And the talks are not just about shoulder. I mean, there's some other really cool stuff that you bring to the table too about being in practice. And you had me do, some entrepreneur stuff as well. So, really, again, kudos to you. Do love the meeting. Very excited to have been invited back again for next year and looking forward to it very much. All right, let's talk about, one of the things that I think is probably the most complicated thing in shoulder surgery right now. and that is shoulder replacement. I mean, back in the day when I was a young guy like you didn't really have a lot of choices. You got a couple products, couple modularity things, but really there wasn't a lot going on. It seems like every day there's a new total shoulder, company coming out, whether you're doing reverse, whether you're doing long stem, short stem, all of these things. So it really takes a tremendous amount of knowledge to be really good. And for our listeners, the reason the shoulder is so difficult is because it has such a freedom of motion, and so which is great, but it also can have instability, which makes it difficult, and you got to get it just right. And so shoulder's been delayed in some of the robotics and navigation world that we've been so excited about in knee replacements, moving into hip now. So tell us about your experience. I know that you weren't on the initial design team for the Zimmer Biomet, ROSA robot, but you were like the first dude outside of the design team to do it. And I think that's so cool because you're still relatively young in practice, and I think these are the things that you do really well, the networking things that you're talking about. So first and foremost, tell us why ROSA, Zimmer Biomet ROSA robot, is making you better as a shoulder surgeon.
Yeah, I think, I completely agree with that. I think shoulder has often taken not necessarily a back seat, but it has just been a little bit behind in terms of pushing the envelope behind hip and knee. And I think we're finally getting there where not only are we meeting that level of technology, but perhaps we're expanding on it and beating on it. So I think ROSA has been a very interesting experience to utilize. I mean, it's still in its early evaluation. It's in its limited release. And everyone's just said, hey, how is it? How does it go? And I said, hey, for the first to market V1, really not like pretty good, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we are talking about taking a 3D human being, putting them into a 2D scanner, segmenting it into a 3D planning software, and now executing that with a robotic assistance, which can track a shoulder in real space. So can track a humerus, cut at the right angle, can track the center of a glenoid, which you can't see the back of, right? And like you can in a knee, and then get it in the right place and actually execute what you've planned. And I think if you think of it from that point of view, it's pretty incredible, the technology and the leaps we've made. I think it can only get better. I mean, obviously there's room for improvement on anything. I mean, everything that we're doing, there's room for improvement. But I think it's been a good turning point for the market and a good turning point for shoulder in general, not only having achieved that technological milestone, but now pushing others to do the same. And I think when you get into that technology race, it is only good for people and for patients ultimately, because we will have to push each other to try and overtake each other, which is great. I think that's really what that's what America's about, right? I mean, it's American innovation at its finest, really.
I mean, when I think of robotics and navigation of the shoulder, I mean, I think that's a really important place because, I mean, every time I don't do any shoulder replacement, but every time I go to one of these shoulder conferences, it's all about the mistakes, right? I mean, they throwing up this and that broke over there and that's too loose over there and these horrendioma cases. So if we can eliminate the outliers and make this tool better for the average person that's doing it, that may not be doing 50 shoulder replacements in a year, maybe they're only doing one a month, then I think this is a way in which we can improve accuracy and hopefully improve outcomes for the patients as well. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal, right? Because I think the ultimate goal is, I mean, how do we make all surgeons better? Obviously, there's differences in training, there's differences in experience, there's different in geography, location. So we try and do things like meetings, like courses. Like I think that's probably why there's a reason there's so many shoulder courses, is because there's a gap in education that needs to be filled, very much regionally based. And then can we do it? Can industry help us do that? And can we do that through technology? And I think that's where this will have value because it's very easy to say, well, then why are you doing the procedure? Just send it to somewhere else. That's simply not practical for a lot of people and for most of the country. People need care where they live. And it's not practical for everyone to just drive or get on a flight. I mean, for some people it is, but for most it's not. So you need to be able to offer a level of care that is as high level in a bigger center or a more geographically dense area than would be elsewhere. And technology can do that. So I think realistically, if you're talking about the actual value of all this to patient care, I think that's where it is.
All right, so look, I got something I'm a little worried about, for you, and I got to bring it up, and I want to make sure you're okay. But, dude, I saw you on like Instagram with your surfboard the other day. I know that, I mean, how's this thing going? It's just not easy to be. My oldest is in Carlsbad, and it's all about tacos and surfing. I get that, but man, don't hurt yourself. How's this thing going?
So, best decision I ever made was to learn how to surf. We all need a hobby. So, obviously I live here by the beach, and I was looking at it. I always want to learn how to surf. I was like, should I do it? I'm in my mid 30s. Is this a good idea? I just started. I went to a local surf shop. I completely got ripped off by those 18-year-old kids who worked there. It was the first time I was completely okay being a mark. And I just got my stuff and I just started doing it. Took a couple lessons, and I said I needed a hobby where I didn't have to spend 3 hours doing it. So it's just 1 hour. I don't have my phone, and I'm not good at it. So if I don't focus, I'm going to really hurt myself. So I think that it really met all those criteria in terms of what I can do. It's been interesting. I got stung by a stingray the other day. It was the worst thing that I've gone through in a long time, but it's been good. It's really one of the best decisions I've made in a long time.
That's awesome, man. Hafiz, this has been a pleasure talking to you. I just love your path, your journey, right through all of the places that you've been to wind up now in Newport Beach. I think that your passion for education, we didn't talk about it, but you're also involved with fellows as well. There's a sports medicine fellowship that you're with, all the society work that you're doing as well as to educate and developing your own course, which I love, and the intimacy of it and what you've done. And look, you're a rising star in orthopedics. We greatly appreciate the time that you've taken to be here with us today to be able to share your unique story.
No, I appreciate the invitation, and always good to hang out with you.
My pleasure, brother. We'll be seeing you soon. This is Dr. Scott Sigman, #FollowTheFro, host of The Ortho Show. Until next time.